Hey, you're listening to Furni. This is episode 3, and we talk about spending lots of money on furniture, not spending money on furniture, Snake, and Supreme Aalto stools. Okay, you have $100 and your apartment's empty. Where do you start? So
you have a mattress.
You have a mattress, you have cutlery and dishes.
And your computer's on the floor.
Your computer's on the floor. You have $500. Where do you start?
Do you have more money incoming?
You buy one Supreme Aalto collab stool.
I feel like I've seen people with that vibe where it's like everything's on the floor. Like you're I saw this crazy video. I should actually send it to you. It's like this girl going around her apartment, like describing her design decisions. And it's like her mattress is on the floor and like all her books are on the floor. Like everything's on the floor. And then she has one like $3,000 stool. And that's like her elevated kind of design, which I found was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
You buy like a $10 dish rack from IKEA. You buy a $10 doormat from IKEA. You buy a lot of $10 shit from IKEA. You buy like $200 worth of $10 things.
Yeah, well, okay, let me rephrase this. You can spend $500 a month on furniture for the next, 3 years, and you have to kit your place out. You have a mattress and like all your kitchen stuff. Just reframe it that way, because obviously otherwise you're going to be like, well, I'm going to buy like a lac table.
Like, I would say the first thing I do is buy like a $500 rug, to be honest.
Yeah.
I feel like that's probably my go-to, is that, maybe a couch.
Couch is something that hurts. Like when you move me, so we moved and didn't have a couch for a period of time. And it was probably like the worst thing to not have, because you can eat your dinner on the couch.
Yeah.
You can sleep on the couch.
No, it's true.
You obviously just chill on the couch.
I think like order of like importance, couch is kind of number one. You need couch before you need most things. I mean, I think it's like couch and then rug. I just think rug is like really up there for me, just because
that's crazy.
It really
that rug setup. Rug. I mean, I do agree. Like a rug is really important in like sort of warming up or tying a space together, or like covering up some shitty floor. But
yeah, I'm a room at a time type guy, and so it's like if you're going to start with a couch, then it's like, well, you might as well just start with the living room. Everything else can wait and will come when it comes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
For me, the rug, the logic there is that, it cozies up a space. It like helps the sound in a space. It just feels, I'm a big rug guy. What can I say?
Yeah.
I mean, I really believe in rugs.
I love rugs as well. I mean, I used to just have like a plywood bed and milk crates, and like a milk crate could be kind of repurposed around the house. Milk crates kind of fell off, but they used to be really popular.
Yeah, but the milk crate thing is milk crate with plywood, like bed frame.
Yeah. Pretty
sweet, because you get storage in it as well. But interesting question.
Not really a useful thought experiment.
Last episode we left off kind of talking about like, where you land trying to furnish your apartment and not spend like $1 million. How do you kind of like elevate your space without spending a bunch of money?
I mean, Noah Daniel talks about this, but it's like IKEA, Facebook Marketplace, thrift stores kind of. I feel like thrift stores can be really good for extremely small items like vases, and like I got a cool basket from a thrift store. Yeah. There are certain items that are kind of overlooked at thrift stores. I feel like kitchenwares and like small storage baskets. You're not going to find really nice chairs at Salvation Army, I don't think. I mean, I haven't. But yeah, I mean, those are kind of the 3 places that I've bought a lot of my budget stuff, and then obviously just like screwing together plywood. And, this is all, I mean, I don't know how much this has to do with design, but yeah, that's like the reality of just like furnishing an apartment when you have no money.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk about the Snake article, but I know my thoughts on it.
Yeah, so, okay, for context for the viewers, we kind of lost an episode because I screwed up my microphone. My audio quality was super bad. So we recorded this hour-long episode and then like kind of lost it all. So now we're going back to re-record this episode, but we sort of like organically discussed everything, and it feels weird to like force talk about it. But one of the main things that we wanted to discuss was like this guy, Sammy Reese, who runs a Substack called snake.substack. And he's a journalist that talks about design and furniture, and has a lot of really sort of valuable insights that I hadn't heard voiced before. And one of the articles he wrote, which I sent to you, was what to do when everything in your hut feels mid, something along those lines.
Yeah.
Which was something that resonated with you.
Yeah, exactly. I was pretty inspired by the article and his writing. I think like there's not a lot of, even people we've brought up on the podcast before, like Michael Prokopow or Noah Daniels, not the same bot, but just these kind of other outlets for like people talking about furniture and design and like how to set up your space, whatever, whether it be on like the more academic side or the more like TikTok side.
Yeah.
It's like, the snake thing feels like, maybe a kind of perspective that I align with more. And some of the stuff he brought up in that article, I guess I just felt like were kind of inspiring for me because I feel like I've had a hard time figuring out where I land with like the amount I want to invest in this stuff in furniture and especially moving and realizing that like a lot of the shit that I own is not that nice and kind of sucks and it's just like whatever. It's when you're in those kind of transient states that you realize like the shit that you have, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And realize that not a lot of it's good. And that's one of the things he's talking about.
Yeah, definitely when you have to pack up your whole apartment and you like kind of look at everything and you sort of realize that most purchasing decisions that were made were kind of just reactive to like your needs and not so much your actual wants.
Exactly. And like, I think figuring out, it's just, it can be really daunting as well when you're in that situation of like, I have this newfound or kind of like acquired interest in design all of the sudden since 3 years ago when I moved. And it changes my approach to like, okay, I'm moving to a new place and I have all this stuff I need to buy. Like, where do I start? And I think it's really hard to make that choice of like, oh, I'm going to put off buying a lot of stuff and I'm instead going to like invest in this more expensive thing that I think is like ultimately more valuable and will kind of like be a piece that I'll keep for a long time or whatever. This whole like mentality and to actually like commit to that.
Yeah.
It's just tough when there's a lot,
Yeah, totally. And I can't remember everything he talks about in that article, but one of the sort of philosophies that I do agree with is that you inevitably just have to start somewhere. Like, and one thing kind of leads to another.
For sure.
One interest leads to another. I mean, it's like, I think he talks about some sort of Memphis clock that he bought. That was sort of interesting to me because that's such a sort of small, insignificant thing. Really actually not necessary. Like, I don't have any clocks in my house actually. But the logic kind of tracks, which is that, you begin somewhere and it might feel kind of like this thing is just lost in like an ocean of IKEA and like free crap that you have. But naturally it just sort of evolves. And that's the nature of collecting things or being interested in things, is that you rarely do it all at once. It just turns into like a sort of interest in itself and like a process.
It's specifically in that he talks about this like little table lamp he has, this like Italian 80s table lamp that he really likes. I can't remember the name of the designer, but he talks about how like when he comes in or he leaves the room, he like always takes a bit longer to look at the lamp. He like loves that, and I think it inspires you when you have something like that to be like, fuck, I want to get like more stuff like that.
Yeah.
That you have that kind of thing with where you're like, you look at it, you're like, damn, that's just such a nice lamp. And you every time you look at it, you think that, and that's nice.
Yeah.
Or that's like such a beautifully designed thing or whatever. Yeah, that's definitely like the goal. And I guess there are a few things that I own that I feel that with. It's kind of the thing of like, what stops me sometimes from doing it is just realizing that like I can bring gold into a pile of turds and it will just end up looking like a turd, you know what I mean? When we last talked, I was talking about Furni as like an example, which I think makes really nice furniture. But like if I brought it into my, mid dining area or my mid lounge area or whatever, it would just look like a regular ass chair to me. I think, no shade on Furni. It's more just to understand that like, I guess it's important to buy things that inspire you to want to continue elevating objects, You want everything to like live up to the other best object you have.
Yeah.
So rather than like the weakest link idea, it's actually like the strongest link idea.
Yeah, I agree.
It doesn't stop me from making impulse decisions. As you know, I recently acquired a large rice paper lamp from Hay.
Yeah.
And that's like me making a choice that's like, I didn't end up doing like the elevated pick. I did like the easy pick, but I don't know. at the same time, you got to pick your battles. So
yeah, lighting, going back to the $500 dilemma, lighting is definitely somewhere, looking back, that I start when I'm in a new space. And
yes,
not that it has to be expensive or designer lighting, but just you move into an apartment and all there is like pot lights that kind of make you feel like you're in Walmart or something. Lighting's a pretty key thing. But also lighting is so sort of transposable between our apartments. I've kept lighting between moves, and sort of like lighting generally as just something that creates atmosphere, I think is pretty powerful. And that could even just be like bulbs, like people that have like those white bulbs or whatever, like that's just like the easiest fix to just get like a warm temperature light bulb that's not super bright, or like a pendant light that
sometimes I do go into like a friend's house or something, and I'm like, and you're trying to figure out what the hell is going on with like, oh, like I don't know why, but this feels like not right.
Yeah.
And it's because the bulbs aren't 2700K, man.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, maybe not. Maybe there's other warmths to go with. Warm white is like a minimum, you know, for me at least. But
oh yeah,
it does make a huge difference. And I will say, like, when I moved, one of the first things I did was like put my lamps in the room and turn those on.
Oh yeah, and then turn off the overhead lights.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, is kind of up there with sound as far as I think like subconsciously how you feel being somewhere. And I feel this way with restaurants a lot, because restaurants are more prone to using like tile and metals and like the acoustics of space and like lighting. Like I've been in restaurants that have been really nice, but just like way too fucking loud, and it can completely like ruin the experience for me. I've become kind of like neurotic about that sort of stuff.
Absolutely.
So maybe I would start with like some of the Burlak like acoustic panels. I'd buy one of those.
Yeah.
And wrap it around my head.
Yeah, you have like a mattress on the floor and like the cloud, like $10,000 worth of cloud panels just covering your walls, like an insane asylum.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's true though. Like acoustics are a huge part of, I think, how we experience space. I mean, as much as light, you know, when you go into someone's house and maybe it feels a bit off, it's also like if you don't have enough stuff in your apartment and like the sound is bouncing all around, it's also kind of like a maybe subconsciously off-putting vibe.
Yeah, hugely. I mean, Noah Daniel, I think, our favorite YouTuber, interior design YouTuber, I think is pretty good about tackling the questions of like how you handle outfitting your crib when you have no money. Yeah. Generally, you know, like I enjoyed his videos where he just like peruses Facebook Marketplace and kind of like outfits an apartment, because the reality is people that watch and listen to this stuff, for the most part, I don't imagine have the money to actually spend on things beyond like IKEA.
I would say most people in my life, including myself, don't have the money to properly furnish like an apartment. And by properly, I mean not buy used furniture, not make compromises. I guess my point is that like if you really wanted to like furnish an apartment, me being in this situation right now, it's like it's tens of thousands of dollars.
Oh my God,
you know what I mean?
For sure.
For like a 2-bedroom apartment, it could easily be like $20,000. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate his content in that way, I guess, that it's just like it does seem relatively sensitive to the fact that like, you know, people don't have that much money and aren't just going to go on Design Within Reach and like buy a bedroom set for like $10,000 or whatever. It's a tough thing to balance. And as we talked about in our previous conversation, like especially just our situation in Canada, and it's like, you know, it's IKEA, and if you can find affordable shipping from Hay, in some way, like that's like a nice intermediate. But you know, because of like the lack of history, there's less used furniture that even feels kind of elevated or whatever. It's definitely something I'm struggling with right now. But I think the main philosophy I'm trying to figure out is like, is it more important to have like the essential things, or is it more important to like buy like the right thing and accumulate slower and just lack things in your apartment?
Yeah, that's a tough balance to strike, because I mean, idealistically slow, but inevitably
for sure
fast. Yeah, and then you know what happens, at least for me, is that I'm like, well, I don't really love this stuff in my house, like my dining chairs I'm kind of like so on, but they work, and inevitably you don't have as much money as you hope you'd have. So it becomes hard to justify replacing the things that are working. And so then you kind of just like have some stuff that you don't feel that strongly about, which is sort of the narrative of my apartment. But relating back to like our previous conversation, for me, my sort of solution to that, because there are solutions, is like, I love Jasper Morrison. We both love Jasper Morrison. Yeah, it's like I can't afford to buy Jasper Morrison stuff with Capellini or Vitra or Maruni. But what I can afford is to go buy 2 spoons from Muji.
Yeah, man.
Because I needed 2 spoons.
That's funny, man. The only thing either of us own from Jasper Morrison are cutlery.
Cutlery?
From Muji.
Big shouts to Muji for being like a really great option for nice home goods designed by
absolutely
intelligent people that care.
Yeah, for sure. Big shouts. Also big shouts to Hey, because they do kind of do the same thing on even a more real level in some ways. Like you guys could have like a Buralek balcony set if you wanted from Hey. You know what I mean?
If we were to equate it to fashion, like I would say lighting is like the ball cap of fashion, or the ball cap of furniture rather. You know what I mean? Like lamps. In that, like, if you have a completely uninspired outfit, but then you buy some hat that you feel excited about and you put your hat on, it kind of like, it takes over. You like transform into the person you want to be. Or maybe this is just me. I'm kind of a hat person.
No, it's true. Like the hat energy.
The hat is like the biggest sort of vibe article of clothing, I would venture to say.
I don't know how to say this.
Just say it, man.
My girlfriend, she'll refer to them as like hat blank or like hat name, like hat John, for example, when we're going to hang out with John, because it's like
2 different.
He transforms into like a different person.
Yeah,
it's true. There is something about like the ball cap that is, it does change you. But yeah, I know what you're saying. I guess like it does. Lighting makes a huge difference in terms of like how you perceive a space. Absolutely.
It's just kind of like a vibe. It's kind of a vibe.
Lighting is vibe.
But then what are the socks and underwear?
Dude, socks and underwear is like...
cutlery.
Yeah, like dish rack, as Snake says, you know. That's your underwear. It's like, you're going to neglect it. There's going to be holes in it. Like, it's not your nicest thing, but it doesn't really matter because like it's rare that people are thinking about it. But once you have nice versions of your underwear, you realize... that was how was I living like that? You know what I mean?
Without the merino underwear.
Yeah, without the wool underwear. You know, it's nice. You realize that it is actually nice to have a nice cutlery set.
For me, it was like my life is sort of split into like a before and after. It was before I had wool socks and after I had wool socks. That was a big one for me.
See, it's funny. The wool sock thing I get, but I actually mostly don't wear wool socks. Like I have some pairs. But it didn't change my life as much as it seemed to change most of my friends' life. And
yeah, it was integral for the health of my foot.
Yeah.
My feet are, I feel like I would rate them as quite sweaty. So if you're out there with sweaty feet wearing cotton socks, or God forbid you're wearing polyester socks, give merino a shot. They're a little pricey, but also I will say like the furniture version of that, the before and after furniture version of that for me is probably a pendant light, because in a space there's like no real sort of top-down lighting alternative to a pendant light, and once you use a pendant light in a space, it's hard to go back to pot lights or some sort of ceiling, something that's like stuck to the ceiling.
Can I get a vibe check on the glow ball by Jasper Morrison? And I had thought about it. I'm really going through this pendant light dilemma right now, which me and you have talked about, but you brought up the glow ball and I was like looking at it. I was like, I guess it's technically it's buyable. It's like $600, so it's expensive, but it is like purchasable.
You could find a used one maybe.
Yeah, I was looking on like eBay, whatnot, but what is your vibe on that lamp? Because I understand why it's like cool, but I also, I understand it in its context, which is like designed in the 90s, you know what I mean? So
that was the first thing I was going to talk about. I mean, for those who don't know, the glow ball is what it sounds like. It's a ball, like a glass sphere, I should say, that's slightly squished, and it comes in different formats, like a table light or like it's sort of like a frosted glass orb. Yeah, it was designed in 1999, so it's one of those objects that in retrospect seems very obvious, but at the time was probably fresh and still is fresh, but just has been kind of like perpetuated so many times that, I don't know, it's like hard. It's one of those things that you look at and you're like, $1,000 for like a spherical, like an orb.
Well, it's one of those things that you look at and you're like, this could be on Wayfair, or I could go into like Home Depot and buy this glass like light fixture.
Yeah.
I guess that's the only thing that kind of stops me at the end of the day. It's just like
you feel like it's not enough of a thing to justify its cost, basically.
I just feel like it's tough for me. I'm still hung up in that way, which makes me wonder, like, am I not truly ascended? Which is just like, it doesn't have enough of like a presence, which is partially what's likable about a lot of Jasper's designs.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's quite a statement to hang like a sphere from your ceiling. And I feel like, I suppose in its simplicity, it's kind of striking, but I do hear you that I don't think that whether you like or dislike it or feel like you're getting it or not getting it is any reflection of like your interest.
I do get it, and I understand the appeal. It's just, it's tough because I feel like it doesn't do enough for me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It doesn't like do enough for me on like a way. I don't know if that's true. I mean, honestly, I would be more inclined if the diameter was bigger. It's just not that huge. It's not that big of a light. There is like varying sizes, but
yeah,
it's not huge. It's like the largest size is like 20 inches maybe, or 20. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I like it, but I don't have too much to say on it. Although it does kind of have a strangely neutral atmosphere. Which is kind of a notable sort of the thing with Jasper Morrison, I find, is that if you were to have to describe the atmosphere or sort of like characteristic of his design work, it would be hard to lump it into a context or like a sort of definitive, I don't know. It would be hard to lump it into like a definitive vibe, you know, like it kind of can exist in any space, but usually I find it's relatively modern. His work generally is kind of modern, but then it's always so simplistic that I suppose it's like simplicity is fairly well balanced with its like modernity, in that like new technology and new materials are usually kind of used in maybe more like extreme ways. I don't even know if I believe what I'm saying, but I'm going to continue saying it. But yeah, anyways, I mean, yeah, Jasper Morrison is an enigma deserving of his own episode. But yeah, nonetheless, the glow ball's a kind of curious object.
It's one of those things that it almost feels similar, akin to like Mac DeMarco or something, where it's like
Dude.
The sound has become so ubiquitous. No, I don't mean in terms of like vibe. I don't think that Mac DeMarco would have like a glow ball lamp, but
yeah, I
mean in terms of like his sound became very like ubiquitous, and therefore like kind of he became like a victim of his own success. And I kind of feel that way about the glow ball a little bit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It became a victim of its own, like how good of an idea was, and it got co-opted so much.
Yeah. I mean, simple ideas, not really speaking musically, but I feel like in design, simple ideas, especially successful ones, are just perpetuated. I mean, the Aalto stool's classic example of that, but like the Emiko chair, I mean, which is actually really not, I wouldn't call that simple per se, but nonetheless, yeah, there's something about like extremely simple ideas that just do start to feel diluted with time, I suppose, because inevitably places like IKEA or whomever end up kind of making their own version of it for like a fraction of the cost. So
absolutely.
So it's hard not to look at this stuff and be like, well, IKEA makes essentially the exact same thing, obviously of less quality, for like a fraction of the price. So why can't Floss make it for that cheap? And, you know, obviously there's many reasons that they do not or cannot, and that only places like IKEA can like afford to sell things at that price point. But nonetheless, the simple things are definitely prone to being like knocked off. And then like, I mean,
all right, to loop it back to like the very start, like you have $1,000 to spend on a pendant light.
On a pendant light, hell yeah, that's my kind of budget.
Yeah, no, but that's like an interesting thing is like if you legitimately had $1,000 to spend on a pendant light and you had no pendant light, like what do you do? Because it's like, yeah, you could get the glow ball, but then it's like, would I really want to do that over like, I don't know,
Kojima Shoten?
Yeah, Kojima Shoten, which is like, oh, you're talking about like, so I can buy this orb like glass light made in, you know, that's made, whatever, from this Italian floss company. No shade to the history of floss. Like I think floss has done some really cool things. Or you can buy this like very natural
Sort of
rice
handcrafted.
paper, like this organic object that's been, in development since the 1700s from this company,
Yeah. Funny enough, it's also an orb, but yes.
Also an orb, yeah. No, which I mean, there's definitely a through line, which is like, can the orb be? I think it can, but I guess what I'm saying is that like, can the Kojima Shoten, like that feels like more justifiable to me in the sense that, or at least for me and the kind of consumer I am, it's like, oh, like there's this crazy history there and there's this texture to it and this like natural organic quality that makes it really appealing, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
If I had $1,000 to spend on a pendant light, I'd be more likely to spend it on the Kojima Shoten. But then you realize that Kojima Shoten just did a collab with Supreme.
And that sort of dilutes.
It doesn't cheapen it necessarily. It makes it feel slightly less authentic to yourself, like a less authentic decision, Like it was more informed by it was more informed by culture than it was, yourself.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, glass is also one of those things that we just sort of now associate with like industrial production. So that compared to like rice paper, which is more of like a handcrafted thing. But I think the floss, I mean, I was just reading the Floss Global at least, and I think a lot of their glass objects are like whatever, blown glass by their sort of craftsmen in Italy, which is a crazy process for anyone that hasn't actually seen like glass blowers blowing these things. It's insane. But yeah, no, I do hear what you're saying. Like the one that sort of reflects maybe more like craftsmanship or like of a handmade sort of quality is a more justified purchase in some way.
Well, it is in my mind. I don't actually think it is like in reality per se. And I don't think it's the more based pick. I don't think it's like the better pick. It's just that I have that tendency. And I feel like that's where I lack maturity is like a person interested in furniture, is that I'm still kind of attached to these more kind of vapid like idea. They're not vapid necessarily, but they allow me to feel good about what I'm purchasing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They comfort me rather than me just like being like really confident in what I'm believing design wise. You know what I mean? It gives me a reason that I don't have to come up with or like I don't have to worry about. So when someone asks me like, why does this lamp cost $1,000?
You have like a good reason.
I don't think you need to be like that. Like I think.
Yeah, you don't need a reason to like what you like per se. I mean, and especially when it comes to something as kind of subjective as furniture. I mean, one could say the same about clothing, but from a sort of functional standpoint, yeah, we're not really dealing in objective terms when we start to like make these decisions. I think really, I mean, especially when you start to get into expensive furniture, it starts to come down to like narrative of the manufacturer, narrative of the designer. And that's the nature of getting like deeper and deeper into like a certain interest, is that like this sort of history of these people is a huge part of what sort of becomes intriguing. And it's not simply like the form or the function of this thing, but it sort of starts to become what it represents and like the history of how it sort of came to be. And in that way, both these companies, Kojima Shoten and Floss, are like super interesting. So like I think a lot of people would look at designer furniture and just sort of balk at the price point quite quickly. But I also think that in equal parts, if people were exposed to the manufacturing processes of some of these furniture manufacturers and maybe the rigor involved, or the sort of quality or standards that they adhere to, the cost, I mean, at least for me, that's been my experience, because the Noguchi like lamps, like when I watched a video of how those were made after only seeing rice paper lamps at IKEA, the Ikari sort of like factory or workshop, I guess you'd call it, watching them work and make these rice paper lamps, which is completely done by hand, like bending bamboo around jigs and like hand gluing paper on top of a lamp. It's like incredible, firstly, but also the sort of skill and time and rigor involved, to me, like completely justifies what it costs. I mean, our relationship to the cost of things generally is super skewed. And like, I was saying this to someone there was a friend of mine showed me a photo of like the last train at a Union Station, which is like the major train station in Toronto, at like the last train out, whenever that is, I don't know, it's like midnight or who knows. It's like completely full of e-bikes.
But
Like the photos of the last train out are insane because they're just completely full of e-bikes, and it's all these Uber delivery guys that come downtown to like deliver food. I've talked about this to like a couple friends already. But you know, these e-bike guys that deliver food for Uber or DoorDash or whatever cannot afford to basically pay their rent in Toronto, so they live in like the periphery of Toronto, which is a lot of Toronto, and like probably a lot of major cities now is like people commute in to like make their money and then have to commute out because like the cost of living is getting so high.
Yeah.
In a long roundabout way, I guess that topic of discussion makes me think about how used to like the price of food delivery we've gotten and how broken of a system that is. And in the same way, when it comes to clothing manufacturing or furniture manufacturing, generally, I think we've gotten very used to things being cheaper and cheaper because of the volume that factories can produce at and the conditions that people sort of work under or the wages that they're paid. And so when we see like a rice paper lamp or a glow ball for like $1,000, we're like, well, you know, why would that be the case when IKEA can do it for $5? I think, yeah, when you really start to inspect the sort of environments that these things are made in, or maybe the sort of degree to which they're considered, you can start to see that break down a bit. And so I think, yeah, I guess it's a long roundabout way of saying that I do feel the price is justified in certain things, even though they have the appearance of simplicity.
I guess it's just that the interesting thing is that like for me as a consumer, price justification starts to be, I need to be able to justify it to other people. I do agree with you that like in general, you know, it's the whole thing of like out of sight, out of mind. Like we're willing to accept lower, you know, we love lower delivery costs. So we want everything to be cheaper as long as we don't have to see like how shitty that actually is for like the people on the other end of the stick or whatever.
Yeah.
It's weird to me that I feel this need to like be able to justify it to myself and other people when I should just be like, you know, I like everyone involved in this process is probably getting like a fair wage and like there's a history here and that should be enough. But often it's not.
Totally.
It needs to be unique. It needs to like whatever. And I liked what you were talking about before, which is like a lot of the way that design like or more high-end design tries to deal with this issue is like of justification is like it'll last forever or whatever, when in reality like that doesn't really matter so much. It just needs to last like about 10 years or less and we'll do the job of getting rid of it and finding something else, you know. But I like the idea that maybe design is more so justified as an expression, as like an essential expression.
Definitely, I think for people that are not interested in design is like designer, quote unquote, furniture is seen as like an opulent indulgence, whereas the arts, you know, is less so. At least to me, this is maybe how I feel about it, is there's just some association of opulence because the reality is it costs a lot of money.
Yeah, I think people view the arts as like an emotional kind of expression, and design doesn't really have that. But I think if you view design as like a societal expression, you can start to understand the value, or like a cultural expression.
Yeah.
You can understand the value of high-end and precise and like historic, you know, design from floss or... Yeah, when you look at it more as like this cultural expression, you do want that stuff. I feel like most people I know, even people, you know, people who aren't interested in expensive furniture and expensive design would still see the value in having that stuff around.
Yeah, absolutely.
And wouldn't necessarily just see it as like rich, opulent bullshit. Because I think a lot of it is probably, I don't know, just that. But there is also
I think there's a lot of that.
Other things going on with like really expensive furniture.
I agree. It's definitely not a personal expression, but it is a cultural one. And I think that's, for me, the narrative that interests me more with design and sort of, I guess, how I engage with it and collecting these things is that it does express something about where it came from and the logic of its existence. That's sort of like tantalizing for me.
For sure.